Thanks for watching my video. If you like it, give me a thumbs up. Please do not hit the dislike button. I need the money for making these videos. So we're going to replace our drive shaft center bearing. This truck has 210,000 miles. We're going to remove the bolts which hold the drive shaft to the rear differential. There's 6 of those. This is one of those jobs that you probably should do if every time you put your truck into drive and you start to move that there's a clunk underneath you. Usually you'll feel it in your butt. You'll hear it just like a clunk. So on this particular truck, it is the bushing that's bad. The bearing is just fine. So we've got our 6 bolts out, and at 200,000 miles, your drive shaft is probably going to be rusted onto the differential, just like this one is. And it just takes a little bit of persuasion. So I just took a ball peen hammer, gave it some wax, and it finally broke itself free. So we're going to lay the back end of the drive shaft on the ground, and we're going to remove the 2 nuts that hold the center drive shaft bearing onto the cross member, onto the frame of your pickup truck. These 2 nuts might be the easiest part of the whole job. And again, if you're watching this, this is not even a 15-minute video. It's not going to take you 15 minutes to complete this entire task. I'm giving you the Reader's Digest version. Plan on this taking about 2 hours out of your day. That is if everything goes great for you. The center bearing that I bought, it was $120 from Nissan. It was $80 at my local Advanced CarQuest shop, and it was $33 on Amazon for the same exact bearing that CarQuest Advance have for $80. So order it from Amazon. It took about a week for it to get here. It came from Oregon, I believe. But the bearing is working well. So now I'm loosening the clamp. This is just a little pinch clamp that holds this boot onto the front half of the drive shaft. So you just need to loosen that crimp up so you can get the boot off of the front drive shaft, and then slide your rear drive shaft off of the spline. So what I did in this, and I cut away, but I just got my drive shaft in a vise, and I took a Sawzall and I cut some holes in the spacer, and I'm using a pulley puller to just work the this spacer off of the front drive shaft. And getting this bearing off, I'm here to tell you, getting this bearing off is a chore. So really, if you think I'm having issues doing this, just know I had issues doing it. And I've seen other people where they use an air hammer or an air chisel to remove their bearing. I do not have an air chisel, so I'm using an old-fashioned chisel and a hammer. And what I did was I just started on one side and it moved a little bit, and then I would just spin the drive shaft and I would hit it on the other side. And then once I got a pretty good gap, I could go from left to right, front to back, however you want to look at it in the picture. And the bearing just worked its way off of the axle. But this is absolutely a difficult job to do. But you can do it yourself. Like I said, about 2 hours, you can complete this chore yourself. So with the bearing off, I took a piece of emery cloth, and all I'm going to do is polish up where the bearing kind of lives on the axle. So I didn't scar it up or anything, but I do want to put a nice polish on it. I'm hoping that the new bearing will go on easily, and I never have to see this drive shaft ever again. Once you do this job, you'll understand what I mean. Sometimes there's jobs that maybe you should take to a mechanic and have them do it, but again, you're saving yourself a few $100s. So to get the new bearing on, this is a 1 1/2 inch piece of Schedule 40 PVC. When you're installing a bearing like this, typically you want to use a press. My press isn't tall enough for me to put this axle in. So this piece of PVC is going to land on the inner race of the bearing. So I'm not actually hitting the bearing or where the ball bearings are in the bearing. I'm just hitting the inner race. And at 1.5 inches, it's hitting right on it. And I'm not even coming close to touching the rubber that protects the bearing. So I'm using PVC, a plastic pipe, and I'm using a dead blow hammer to hammer it on. So there's no way that this steel bearing is going to get damaged with me banging plastic against it. So I'm just hitting it on, driving it on until the back of the bearing, I guess the front of the bearing, is touching the drive shaft. So once it's in place, this is what it looks like. That looks pretty good. Now we need to replace this spacer. In the kit you get, it comes with 2 spacers. The smaller one you're just going to throw out. You only need this one. You only took 2 off, you're only going to put 2 back on. So same method. I'm just taking my 1.5 inch piece of PVC. It's 7 inches long. So you can go to Lowe's or Home Depot and get a 2-foot section of 1.5 inch PVC, and you only need 7 inches of it. And then put that tool in your toolbox. You may never know when you're going to need it again. So there's the bearing on. Next step, we're going to put some grease back on the spline. When I took this when I took the front drive shaft out of the rear drive shaft, the spline did have minimal grease on it. I imagine all that grease is up in the rear drive shaft at this point in its life, just from hitting bumps and going up and down and in and out. So we're going to grease it, and I did use marine grease. Marine grease won't get deteriorated if any moisture happens to get up in there. And then I'm going to wipe the spline and the seal clean on my transmission. This would be a great time to go ahead and change out the transmission seal. I didn't bother. I didn't want to wait. It was one of those things I forgot to order, so I didn't want to wait for another seal to come in. So I'm just going to use my old seal. It was still rubbery, so I think I'll be okay. I'm only going to use this truck for a beater truck. I just need to go about 5 miles a day. And then when I'm done with it, I'm going to pass it on to somebody else who's going to be grateful to get this truck. It's a pretty good truck with 200,000 miles, 2005. The truck is still very solid. So the front axle's in place. I'm going to go ahead and put my nuts on. I'm going to put these nuts just finger tight. I'm not really going to tighten them down until last. I might need some play, whatever. But I'm not going to put a wrench on them until I get ready to put the truck all back together and tighten everything down all at once. If something comes up, I don't want to have to come back here to take the axle out and have to loosen those nuts back up. So that's what it looks like with the front drive shaft in. Now it's time to put the rear drive shaft in. There's only one way that this axle is going to go on. If you look at the spline, you'll see that there's two ridges cut, and there's two cuts on the spline on the front axle. And you kind of have to turn this drive shaft, you know, just slowly rotate it until it kind of drops into place. And you'll know when you hit it. That's all I can say. You're gonna know when this drive shaft is in the proper location on the spine, because it's just gonna go. Do not force this. You hear me? You hear me out there? Don't force this. Don't be He-Man underneath this truck. You'll mess something up. If you start scraping that blue silicone, that blue plastic that's on that spline, if you start scraping that up and it doesn't make a good contact to the rear axle, the rear drive shaft, it's going to clunk around. Your drive shaft is going to clunk around. So, you know, be careful. So I thought I had it right there. And it kind of, I should have cut out all this fidgeting around that I'm doing with this drive shaft. But like I said, when it falls into place, you're going to know it. There we go. You just saw it slide on.
Fucking got it.
So we're in, and as you see, the rear of the drive shaft is resting on top of the differential. So get yourself a bolt ready and then line it up. And if you're lucky like I am, it's going to line up the same way it came out. And then put a bolt and a nut on it to hold it into place. Remember, you're up underneath this truck, and last thing you want is that drive shaft falling out and giving you a headache. So with the drive shaft in place, bolted up, we're going to go ahead and push that boot back onto the front drive shaft. And once it's in place, what I did was I took a pair of diags and I crimped that clamp, that hose clamp, back down around the front drive shaft. And we're good to go with the front part of it. And then we're going to put our nuts and bolts back into the rear drive shaft and the differential. So this is a very time-consuming job from start to finish. These bolts that I'm installing now, they were like to near impossible to loosen. But I have faith that you can do this, so you know, at least attempt to do it. I mean, wouldn't you rather just spend the $30 to put this new drive shaft center bearing on your truck, waste $30, $35 on the part, and get up underneath your truck and spend some time with your truck? It's just a good feeling. To me it is anyway. I would rather do this myself than watch my hand give several $100s over to a mechanic to let them do it. But by all means, if you want me to do yours, you know, I'd be willing to take $500 to do this job again. That's what the new one looks like. There'll be no more clunking when I go from drive to reverse to neutral, park. So thanks for watching. Give me a thumbs up, please.